few lessons that I thought I must flag as far as Operation Sindoor is concerned. Firstly, one border, two adversaries. So we saw Pakistan one side, but adversaries were two, and if I would say actually four or three actually. So Pakistan was the front face. We had China providing all possible support, and it's no surprise because if you were to look at statistics, in the last 5 years, 81% of the military hardware that Pakistan is getting is all Chinese, 81% of that. So it's no surprise. And China, of course, the good old dictum, killed by a borrowed knife, 36 stratagems that China talks about, killed by a borrowed knife. So he would rather use the neighbor to cause pain than getting involved in the mud-slinging match on the northern border. So that is what he's seen.
Control ALT Defence, presented by Samtel, co-powered by IFCO Tokyo. Hello and welcome to episode 10 of Control ALT Defence. This is a special episode where Vishnu and I are going to talk about news that has broken today itself. The Deputy Chief of the Indian Army, speaking at an industry event, has said some things that we didn't think was going to come from the Indian Army, but it's come explicitly, and Vishnu and I are going to get into it because almost 2 months after Operation Sindoor, Vishnu, this is the first explicit and detailed word about Chinese involvement. And I'm using that word advisedly because there's been some skittishness so far about drawing China too directly into the conversation as far as Sindur is concerned. But you've got Lieutenant General Rahul Singh, who's the Deputy Chief of the Indian Army, talking about Chinese involvement in Operation Sindoor.
Absolutely. This is fairly unprecedented in terms of the message which the Army Deputy Chief was actually giving is that China was involved. It was not just arming Pakistan, which is done for a period of time. It was providing information on a real-time basis to Pakistan. In other words, it had what many would suggest is a direct role in how Pakistan responded to Op Sindoor. And perhaps the most significant part of what he said is that when the ceasefire talks were taking place between the Directors General of Military Operations, their Director General of Military Operations told our Director General of Military Operations to roll back certain vectors or weapon systems. Now, the Pakistanis should not have known about the existence or the state of readiness of whatever that quote-unquote vector was, which I refer to as a weapon system. What the general said is that, or what he implied quite directly, was that the Pakistanis knew about it because China told them.
So basically the Chinese, if I'm not mistaken, had eyes on Indian weapon systems, maybe through satellites, obviously through satellites or some other kinds of sensors. They knew where these weapons are. I'm assuming these are obviously offensive long-range weapons like missiles, etc.
Or even aircraft.
And this real-time information was being supplied to the Pakistanis. And the Pakistanis, when they picked up that phone and asked for that ceasefire, they basically had a full Chinese intelligence report about what our weapon systems were that were
what
ready.
the Pakistani Shiv told us is that, look, we want to get into a ceasefire. We are aware of certain weapon systems.
Please roll back these weapons.
Please roll those back so that we can get into a ceasefire scenario.
This is incredible.
It's incredible detail.
No, but is this surprising that the Chinese had eyes on us? Because this would suggest that the Chinese, people are going to be tempted to say that this makes the Chinese a combatant in Operation Sindoor.
I mean, look, modern combat is all about information. Now, information isn't just social media information, but that is also a part of warfare. It is the real-time sharing of data, right? And that includes satellite information, data from a host of sensors, whether you're eavesdropping electronically through other means, human intelligence, all of that. And China was clearly doing that with Pakistan, as per what the Deputy Chief of the Indian Army, a responsible person, has to say. Therefore, if you, Shiv, were to say that, does that not make China a combatant? We can get into the use of the word combatant, but in fact, I would say that, look, they were involved, and they were involved directly in what they did.
Now, I want to labor this point a little bit more because remember, Vishnu, since you and I have been covering Operation Sindoor and we've been doing it very, very closely, including from the border and in Kashmir itself, Operation Sindoor has been an India-Pakistan affair.
Yes.
Now it has expanded into the Indian Army pretty plainly suggesting that it wasn't just Pakistan we were fighting. We'll get to Turkey in just a moment. But I want to finish with China first.
I'm jumping
because
at
he's
Turkey.
saying, because Lieutenant General Rahul Singh, Deputy Chief of the Army Staff, no less, says Chinese intelligence, Chinese real-time data, Chinese real-time information in terms of vectors was being supplied to Pakistan. And he also talks about the Chinese weapons. He talks about how Pakistan
Was
was
a
a weapons
laboratory.
Amazing.
No, he said...
And please list all those weapons also.
No, we'll get to that in a moment. But what he did say is, and I don't have the exact words with me right now, but so I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah.
And what he did say is that the way China often conducts warfare is through deep cuts. I don't know if he said...
Killed by a borrowed knife.
Killed by a borrowed knife, or others would say 1,000 cuts, whatever it is. But that's a different context altogether. But China was using Pakistan to field its weapon systems and to gauge their effectiveness against India, and was in the process of doing that, also gaining a sense of where India stood conventionally with our defenses, because quite clearly they are ranged against us across the Himalayan frontier. Pakistan was the guinea pig, in a sense, for a lot of weapon systems, and a number was given by the deputy chief. 81% of Pakistani weapon systems over the last few years, which Pakistan has imported, are Chinese. And if you're asking me about listing them in the context of what happened during Operation Sindoor, there's the J-10 fighter, superb fourth generation fighter, let's face it, with the PL-15 long-range air-to-air missile, the JF-17 Thunder, less capable, but one which has been inducted in the Pakistani Air Force in large numbers, unlike our Tejas, which has still not really been ramped up to the numbers, because there is a certain element of, it's debatable, of parity in terms of the capabilities of platforms, debatable. That's a separate debate. The HQ-9 surface-to-air missile system, the HQ-16 surface-to-air missile system, the CM series of missiles, which are extremely fast, near hypersonic speed, the CM-400 series, which they did fire as well. And then, of course, the entire range of Pakistani naval assets, which we've reported never really deployed, including the Type 54 frigates. So, and we don't talk enough about the army because, we just haven't gotten around to it. But some of the principal tanks which Pakistan operates are Chinese tanks, extremely advanced designs as well.
And the SH-15 artillery as well.
That's right. That's right. Absolutely. Artillery systems as well. And therefore, all of this was ranged against the Indian armed forces. China was conducting the battle in a sense by providing Pakistan information. Pakistan reacted in a particular way. In most cases, Chinese military, the Chinese weapon systems didn't really achieve as much as Pakistan would clearly have hoped. They've now got an air marshal floating around the world saying that we hit 20 plus Indian air bases. Hello? I mean, how many satellite images have I produced? High resolution on requests, even a few days back, right, when we were showing the impact on Kotli and on Muzaffarabad, to show that, look, this is a Pakistani building. It is now sliced in half. This is another Pakistani hangar at an air base.
With a big hole in it.
It's got a hole in it. This is a smaller hole at an air base, which shows an entry point of a weapon which has gone in and has destroyed it underground. Where is all of this Pakistani evidence? So therefore, if one was to state that the extent of damage caused by Chinese weapon systems on India has been absolutely minimal, it's pretty much what the government of India has said. Unlike Pakistan, India has not been in denial about the impact on air bases. What did they say? Udhampur, they named a few others, I think Jammu as well.
Where there were some drone hits.
There were some we aren't in denial about that. But it's nowhere close to hangars being taken out. Or,
there was no major damage anywhere.
Or weapon systems which penetrate the earth, bunker busters as they were being deployed successfully.
Very interesting.
And no S-400s were taken out.
No, absolutely no damage to the S-400s. There is one aspect of this, and the army is not going to like me saying this, but there is an aspect of trolling that I sense in the body language of what is being said as well. But this is a serious business, so we won't go into that too directly. But I want to say something. When General Rahul Singh says, killed with a borrowed knife, there's a second thing that he says, Vishnu, which is also very interesting. Reluctant to take on India in the Himalayas, where there is a standoff situation taking place. China's involvement in Operation Sindoor, I'm paraphrasing with inferences here, in Operation Sindoor, is the way in which they wanted to wield that knife against
Yeah.
India. They can't do it in Eastern Ladakh, so they did it through Pakistan.
Can I just take that one step
Yes,
forward and
yes.
again say something which the External Affairs Ministry may not be very happy about our saying? There is no peace with China.
Yeah.
It's very tenuous, it's tentative, it's stable right now, the situation along the line of actual control. But the broader strategic concerns which our country faces vis-a-vis China, absolutely mammoth.
Yeah, yeah.
The Chinese are not walking away. Let's go beyond Kailash Mansarovar and the welcome acceptance of Indian yatris onto Chinese soil, or the potential resumption of air travel, or of better visas, tourism, and imports possibly going up.
Yeah, yeah.
We are dealing with a fundamental threat from the world's most aggressive military power, which is the near peer to the United States and which happens to share a boundary with us, a massive one at that. So therefore, China isn't done with us. We need to be aware of that.
Yeah.
And what China was doing by helping Pakistan through real-time information sharing, and they continue to arm Pakistan, right? And we've not even spoken about the Chinese link to their ballistic missile program.
Correct.
That's another thread altogether. We've been talking about that for decades. What China has been doing in the context of Operation Sindoor is, attempting to destabilize us militarily. They failed in that by and large.
Closing out the thought as far as China is concerned, how is this going to go down? Because many people are going to interpret this diplomatically or geopolitically as shots fired. This is the first time India has explicitly, like you said, the word combatant and involvement has not been used, but the very clear inference from the 4 or 5 things that General Sinha has said in this speech.
General Singh, yeah.
General Singh, I beg your pardon, suggests Chinese involvement, and this is how India sees it.
Of
How is
course
that
they were
going to go
involved.
down?
Look, you might have your mandarins in the External Affairs Ministry whose job it is to stabilize the relationship and try and see and play a larger game, looking at the comments and thinking that perhaps they were far too direct and that wasn't really necessary right now. There's a good possibility of China, through their mouthpieces, say giving a
Global
statement
Times,
of
etc.
of Kadi Ninda or whatever the Mandarin equivalent of that is. But I think what the general has said is the truth. And it's time that we as a country, Shiv, accept that truth. We have both covered defense extensively. We know the threat that Pakistan poses, the threat that China poses is many times that.
Correct.
And India is not prepared militarily to deal with that threat.
How bad is the news for China as far as its weapons are concerned? If Pakistan was a laboratory, as General Singh said, and 81% of the weapons that entered Pakistani service in the last few years were basically Chinese, how bad is the news? I'm assuming there's a report of how good their weapons performed or bad their weapons performed in Operation Sindoor. What does that report, in your view, probably look like?
No, so that report and the Chinese or the Pakistani quote-unquote success during Op Sindoor is largely based on their claim that 6 or some reports earlier said 10, 15 Indian Air Force planes had been shot down.
Yeah.
Now, India has never denied that fighter planes have been shot down. And this subclip is going to make it to Pakistani social media, of course.
Yeah.
So which is why I think it's important to preface that
Yeah.
as well. But assuming that Indian planes went down, there would presumably have been a Chinese weapon system which could have been deployed, whether it was a surface-to-air missile or it was an air-to-air missile. But beyond that, the key point is what were India's objectives during Op Sindoor? Where was India in the escalation matrix? Where was Pakistan in the escalation matrix? We escalated big time. We hit their frontline air bases. We hit Rawalpindi Air Base.
Paralyzed their entire ability
Their
to hit
runways
back.
were taken out. Command and control centers were taken out. They came to the ceasefire table. So therefore, what does that say about the success of Chinese weapon systems? You can point out that, that weapon system did really well, or that system didn't do very well. But a weapon system has to have a defining role, or weapons systems have to have a defining role, besides many other factors, in the outcome of a war. In this particular case, you didn't. Now, let's contrast that, for example, with the Bofors gun during Kargil. It is a fair point to say that in a very limited war, geographically, that was one weapon system which had a huge role towards the Indian win.
Yeah.
Right? There is no equivalent of that in the Op Sindoor context now.
Right. Interesting, because as far as China is concerned, it can't be just about one weapon system, sure. But given that this was a 4-day shooting,
A
war,
100-hour war.
and the both of us call it a
108
war.
hour. We absolutely.
call it a war, not a war.
We were
like
hitting
situation.
targets way out in Punjab,
So,
in Karachi.
I'm going to go ahead
you
and
know,
say China was
cantonment.
involved. I'm going to go ahead and say China was a combatant. This is now obviously laid pretty much bare by none, no less than a general of the Indian Army. I'm just wondering what this means as far as the projected quality of Chinese weapons is concerned. A lot of people are very interested in this information.
No, I
Vishnu.
think-
not just India.
Yeah, no. It's a fair point, and I think it would be foolish for anybody
To underestimate.
Chinese weapon systems. The deployment of weapon systems is closely dictated by a certain tactical scenario at the time when an engagement takes place, whether you're firing an artillery round, or you're firing an air-to-air missile, or a surface-to-air missile, or a surface-to-surface missile. That is dependent on multiple factors. So therefore, I'm not sure you could get very much in terms of the overall success of Chinese weapon systems in this 108-hour odd war. But I can tell you, in having spoken to so many people, that the Indian Army, Air Force, Navy are not sitting around feeling that, that's Chinese, therefore it's going to break. That's something that plays out on social media.
Oh, they take it very seriously.
Our forces consider the Chinese threat to be deadly serious. They consider several of their weapon systems to be absolutely state-of-the-art. And as somebody who analyzes, for example, naval weapon systems, if you look at China's frontline frigates, the Type 54, the Type 55 cruiser, if you look at even some of their other surface combatants and their submarines as well, they've reached a level of maturity in technology which is awesome. And I use that word. They are near peers of the United States. So how successful were Chinese weapons in the context of Operation Sindoor? If you look at the overall, battle or the war of Operation Sindoor, which India clearly won, then one would say, no, Chinese weapons didn't alone achieve what Pakistan would have wanted. But in terms of assessing the strength of a weapon system, it depends on its tactical use, its timing, the intelligence, the data links, the training of the soldiers, of the air crew, or the sailors, etc., etc. I'm not going to sort of consider. I don't think we've seen enough of China's weapon systems to make a firm assessment.
Sure. I don't think anybody
But
can
we
judge
did
beyond
shoot
4
down their
days.
CMs 400 series missiles using potentially the S-400. Potentially, Shiv. Potentially. We are in the realm of talking potentially.
2 months later, there still is a measure of fog of war in the findings of Operation Sindoor. But I completely agree with you. I think going into the efficacy or impact of each weapon system is a far more detailed exercise. But I think the end game of Operation Sindoor at least throws up one undeniable
there's
fact
no two ways about it.
that Pakistan's use of Chinese weaponry could not prevent the outcome that happened at the end, where they had to come to the table and literally ask for a ceasefire. So,
Shiv, the escalation matrix.
and they had advanced Chinese weaponry. There's no question about that. All of it used against India.
The escalation matrix, Shiv, was what India relentlessly pushed. When you were in Srinagar on day one, you didn't think that it was going to become as big as it did on day two, did you?
Correct. That's right.
And when the Pakistanis on
just
day
went up
two
and up and up.
went right up, I'm sitting over here in the studio, and you were and we were talking to each other live, and with a sense of disbelief at both levels. You saying, "What on earth is happening? Am I hearing this? Are those drones? Is it even possible over Srinagar or wherever else you were in that area?" And I'm sitting here thinking, I do not believe this has happened as fast as it was. Full-fledged escalation. And what did India do with that escalation? We escalated it way more. Right? We decided as a military and as a country and as a government to ensure we control the escalation matrix. That strategic decision making. And that courageous decision making to ensure that no matter what they did, we would push more and push harder, knowing the threats, right? Is something we did, and who came to that table to talk? They did.
Final point.
Turkey.
Yeah, Turkey. So
let's
come to
not
Turkey
no cold Turkey on that.
Because General Rahul Singh said it was 3 adversaries.
Yes.
Pakistan,
Can you imagine him
China,
saying that?
And Turkey.
Can you imagine him saying
and
that?
the stuff he said.
Yes.
while making that point that there were technicians and operators who were arriving during operations
trained
in
personnel.
trained personnel.
Now,
From
can I
Turkey.
just say that there was that command and control post which I think we knocked out. Was it in Noor Khan?
Yeah, that's
It
right.
was in Noor Khan,
Yeah.
right? I wonder whose control and command and control set up. Must have been Pakistani.
Pakistan.
Must have been. Yeah.
Yeah. No, but seriously, when he says trained personnel landing during, it's one thing for a country to sell another country weapons. We've got countries that sell us weapons, but to have trained personnel landing during Operation Sindoor in real time, helping with the launch of those drones. So Turkey is a combatant as well.
Absolutely. Did he say that in those words?
He said it in
that
all practically those words, yes.
I did hear him talk about trained personnel, potentially alluding to the presence of Turkish personnel on the ground.
Yeah.
We will give him the benefit
we knew
of
about.
doubt.
That
we
we
will
knew
give him
about,
the
though.
benefit of
Yeah.
doubt
Yeah.
that those trained personnel may not have been Turkish combatants on the ground. They could have been trained Pakistanis operating Turkish weapon systems. So I would want to know more about that.
But supplied by Turkey.
But there is,
Yeah.
but the fact, and this was the part which was clear, that he saw three players,
Yeah.
right? China, Pakistan, and Turkey is huge. I mean, and let's go beyond that fog of war in our conversation.
Correct. Yeah.
I believe, and I'm not quoting the army chief or the deputy chief. I believe Turkey was involved.
Yeah.
I do believe that there is every possibility of Turkish military personnel having been deployed in Pakistan, right, in guiding their drone operations. We do know about Turkish drones, being shot down and being caught, and some crashing over here in India.
Yeah.
So what exactly are we talking
I saw
about?
one crashing right in front of me in
Oh, really?
in Srinagar as well.
A yeehaw.
Right in the Dal Lake. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So-
So it wasn't very yeehaw on that occasion.
But Turkey's involvement, this is something that we'd heard about and reported while I was in Srinagar as well, because there were reports about Turkish technicians and operators who were in Pakistan at that time.
Yeah.
And that a couple of them may have actually been killed in the Indian airfield attack in one of those places.
Yeah.
So when General Rahul Singh, and this is the final point now, Vishnu, says it's basically India against three in Operation Sindoor. Again, I'm paraphrasing because he said many things in his own army style.
He
but-
said 4, but then he brought it down to 3, and I'm thinking, was there a 4th? I don't think so.
Yeah. So
but,
Pakistan, China,
Yeah,
and
and
Turkey.
Turkey.
And when you say India and 4 adversaries, I think it's safe to say that they are being rounded up and identified as combatants in Operation Sindoor. How
I
can
think-
it be looked at as anything else?
No, 100%. I agree with you. But I think as we wrap this up, there is that one other point that he spoke right in the beginning of that key 3.5, 4-minute soundbite of his, where he said this time around, we didn't look very closely, or we were unable to look closely at the defense of populated areas, cities, towns, etc., etc. We need to have the ability to intercept projectiles. He said projectiles, not missiles, right? I think you may have used the word shells as well.
Yeah. He said rockets.
He said rockets.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what does that mean?
Yeah. He's talking about something like the Iron Dome.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That is huge.
Yeah.
That is a huge statement. Now, Israel is a country which is the size of, I think, New Jersey, right? India quite clearly is significantly larger, right? I think the Bikaner district is the size of Israel.
Right.
Be that as it may, for India to be deploying those weapon systems, an Iron Dome type system, which is designed to take out rockets, which is designed to take out, weapons which get into a certain proximity, right? Very close to hitting,
Right.
would mean a multi-billion-dollar investment. I'm talking about the numbers could be anything at all, because you're not just going to be defending Amritsar, you'll be defending any number of cities and towns along the frontier, right?
Yeah.
If you've got the deputy chief of army staff talking about the need to protect populated centers,
Population centers
Premised
not too
on-
far from the borders.
premised on the threat from rockets and projectiles or whatever else he said, then you are talking about an Iron Dome system,
Yeah.
right? Now, we can theoretically develop that and deploy it ourselves. But he did also indicate that time was of the essence.
Yeah.
That we can't be sitting around waiting indefinitely for that.
It's good to see, these very clear takeaways and learnings from Operation Sindoor. And I'm personally really glad, because I think Vishnu, in defense circles, the ones we sort of exist in. It's always been a kind of theoretical open secret that obviously China would have been involved in some manner or the other.
Yeah.
We knew about Turkey's as well, but it's completely different. It takes the conversation completely to the next level for the army through a general like Rahul Singh to come out and say India basically had 3 adversaries in this fight. The 100-hour war, as you said, in Operation Sindoor. And we can quibble about involvement, but even taking just the things that the general has said, I would say that these are combatants that we were talking about. Intelligence, information, satellite imagery, much of it fake, by the way, in terms of the information.
So that's the case. If they had all that great information,
Yeah.
which apparently they did, which
Yeah.
they were getting on a real-time basis,
Yeah.
then one would have thought
Yeah.
that somebody would have fed their ISPR some authentic satellite picture.
Yeah.
What they were putting out on social media was
old.
Photoshop stuff,
Photoshop or
old
old.
stuff,
Yeah.
and rubbish.
Yeah, it's
But
it's crazy. I'm just trying to think of what the learnings might be from Pakistan's side, because they've got all this Chinese kit, and again, taking it very seriously, not being facetious about weapons because the Indian military takes them very seriously. I'm wondering what the learnings are. We know what China must be thinking. I'm wondering what Pakistan must be thinking, saddled with all this Chinese kit, which could not sort of preclude a very disastrous outcome for them after a 100-hour war in Operation Sindoor. So we're going to leave it there, Vishnu.
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll get more.
and we hadn't planned to discuss this at all.
We were going to discuss something completely different, but then this bombshell of a clip from the Indian Army just landed at an industry seminar. But I'm so glad we did.
Yeah,
It
we
did,
did.
because it gave us something very newsy to discuss today
Yeah.
in the context of Control All Defence, and I'm glad we did so. And I have a feeling there's going to be much more coming out very, very soon. Clearly, 2
Peg to
months
these
later.
remarks. Peg to these remarks.
That's right. And in a few days from now, remember, it's the second month since
Right.
Operation Sindoor began, and hopefully we'll have much more to talk about. Thanks so much for watching.
Goodbye.